If you've spent any amount of time checking out knives online, maybe knife listings, knife videos, so on and so forth, you'll probably get to a point where you think that you've seen it all. Trust me when I say you haven't. How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny, and today I'm going to show you a custom knife that is beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's a knife that makes me want to wear gloves. And it's from a maker that is not super well known yet. But I aim to change that because this is a knife maker that deserves some credit. They deserve to be noticed. And I think it's only a matter of time before their name blows up. And before you know it, the books are full. Let's check out the Darac Steel Xxl Toucan. Let's go. Alright guys, this is the third custom or semi-custom knife that I've ever had on my channel. There is no box to unbox this with. There's just not. And that's kind of the nature when it comes to custom knives. But it did come wrapped in this hank, and it's a Darac steel hank. And you know, apologies to Dario if I'm getting that wrong. It's either Darac or Darac. I'm not necessarily 100% sure on how to pronounce that. It also came in this pouch as well. I believe this is also from Darac Steel, but I could be wrong. And there's two people ultimately that I want to thank for this video. And the first person is Mike, my friend Mike. He runs the Midgards Messer USA website, and fantastic guy, always supporting the channel. This is his knife. This is his custom. And I wouldn't be able to make this video without him. So Mike, thank you for loaning this to me. I promise I'll take good care of it. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and take off my ring out of respect right now because the last thing I want to do is put any unnecessary wear and tear on this. And then of course the second person is Dario from Darac Steel, because he's the one that made this knife. And some of you might be asking, well, is it a full custom? Is it a mid-tech, you know, semi-custom? What do you call it? Well, that term, you know, mid-tech, full custom, there's no tried and true real definitions. And the definitions that do exist, well, they're kind of lacking and they're not really agreed upon. For the record, I'm not interested in having that conversation. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to call this a custom knife because that's what it is. Dario over at Darac Steel was kind enough to answer a bunch of my questions. And so I'm going to do my best to represent this knife, because this knife is absolutely bananas. It's bananas. Look at this thing. Let's start off with the materials, shall we? This blade is a rose patterned Damasteel blade. So that's not Damascus, guys. That's Damasteel. Damasteel is basically a special mix of herbs and spices that has an RWL 34 core. And Damasteel is always expensive. Don't believe me? Go look at any knife in Damasteel. Again, different than Damascus. Damascus just refers to a bunch of steels that have been mixed and folded and molded together. Damasteel is a proprietary blend of certain steels to get a certain effect. So let's start talking about the knife some more. Rose pattern Damasteel blade, beautifully done. It's got the same Damasteel for the pocket clip. The handle scales are going to be this orange peel textured anodized titanium. It's got this beautiful backspacer right here that I feel like it really does this knife some justice. And then of course here on the show side we've got snakeskin fat carbon with of course the continuance of that beautiful orange peel textured titanium. And you know, when I was talking to Mike about this knife, I said, man, should I wear gloves? And he said, you know, you can, but I'm not going to. I'm going to carry this knife. And so for all of you out there who cringe whenever I mention carrying, you know, a $200, $300, $400 knife. You know, this is a great example of someone who's going to take a $1,600 custom and put it in their pocket, you know, and that's crazy to me, but honestly, I agree with it. I carry everything that I own. I'm not carrying this one because this knife is, you know what, I'm going to let Mike be the one to fully break in and, you know, get the most out of this knife. I'm just here to appreciate it. This knife is big. Let me bring out some knives for comparison. How about the Spyderco Manix 2? It's much, much bigger than a Spyderco Manix 2. And for further comparison, what about if we were to put it up against, say, the Beg Knives Bodega? Beg Knives Bodega is not a small knife, but the Darac steel Xxl Toucan. Did I forget to mention that? That's what this is called. That's called the Xxl Toucan. Much bigger. Now, I happen to know that Mike really appreciates larger knives in the hands. I'm assuming that he's got big hands, but there is something that's innately satisfying about having a big knife. You know, you can always use a big knife to do small tasks, but you can't always use a small knife to do big tasks. And that's really where a bigger knife like this shines through. I really appreciate this blade. Oh, man, this blade is awesome with the big curve up here on the spine. It's a compound grind, so it gets really nice and thin here behind the tip, and then a bit thicker back here towards the tang of the blade. You can get a really nice grip on this knife, very sturdy. There is no jimping here. I have to imagine that that is the buyer's choice. You know, one of the reasons why you get a custom knife like this, one of the reasons why you spend the big money, is so that you can get it your way. There's such a big connection between the buyer and the maker when it comes to a custom knife that I believe really needs to be talked about, because you could tell that this knife was built to spec. It is running on bearings. It's got beautiful material selection. Everything molds together, and it fits an aesthetic that I think is absolutely phenomenal. I want to handle this knife so much. I really, really enjoy it. For the deployment, you have, of course, a flipper tab, and then you also have thumb studs. Now, because this is a heavier knife, and we'll go ahead and wait here in a minute, but, you know, take my word for it, this is not a light knife. You know, you do kind of have to give it a bit of the action. You got to give it a bit of the business. You know, when you deploy this, it's not because you're fidgeting, it's because you want to deploy this. Now, how is the action? Well, because this knife was sent to me pretty much, you know, very quickly after it was made and sent to, you know, its final destination, the action is a little gritty, but I'm going to tell you why. The reason why is because those bearings and that detent are riding across this rose pattern Damascus. So what will happen is over time, the action will get really smooth because it's going to wear a path in that blade for the detent. It's going to wear a track for the bearings, and it's only going to get more smooth. Now, I haven't been handling this a whole lot since it came in because, again, I want to leave the breaking in of this knife to the owner. And I think that's a really special part of buying a knife like this, is being able to wear your own path, beat your own path, you know, be a trailblazer of your own knife. And as someone who has broken in many knives, I can tell you that it's very satisfying, and I can only imagine that it's going to continue to be so on this one. For these screws, we're looking at T10 on the pivot, T10 on the body screws, which is fantastic. A T8 wouldn't do this knife justice. T6 definitely wouldn't. So it's really comforting to see these big body screws and pivot screws. Something I think is pretty crazy is the pivot itself. Look at that thing. It's hollow right here in the middle. This is essentially a single-sided captive pivot, and I love that design right there on the show side pivot. Like, that's cool. It's got a lot of flavor. It's got a lot of flair. And the Xxl Toucan, let me tell you, if you like compound grinds, if you like Damasteel, if you like, you know, orange peel textured titanium that's been anodized, and this snakeskin fat carbon fiber that has so many dimensions, this is a knife that you could pass on. You could keep it in your display case proudly. The fit and finish on here is excellent. Now, when I talked to Dario from Darac Steel, here's what he told me. The only thing that he does not make by hand is the handle skills. He has those cut via water jet. That's it. Everything else is made by hand. He doesn't have a CNC machine. Everything else is done by hand except for the handle skills. That's incredible to me. When you look at this knife and you consider, the fit and finish, where there's edges that could definitely be harsh, but they're not. They're very well knocked down. The chamfers are very well done right here on the blade. I mean, you could call this a swedge, I guess, but it doesn't look like a knife that's been done by hand, because the attention to detail is absolutely bananas. It's crazy. It's incredible to me what can be done by hand if you have the knowledge, if you have the skill. And when people say, well, I could never spend $1,600 on a knife. Listen, this is a functioning piece of art. You could display it, but unlike a Mozart, song or a painting by Picasso, you can't put those in your pocket. You could put this in your pocket. Now, if you do put it in your pocket, it is going to take up some real estate, and it is going to be a little bit heavy. How heavy is it? Let's find out. So I've got my handy dandy trusty scale right here, and we're going to see. So this weighs 10.23 ounces, so 10.25 ounces. This is not a light knife. This is going to be right there in line with my Midgards Messer Thunrar, which I actually think would make for a very nice comparison against this knife, considering that they're both cleaver-ish style blades. Let's go ahead and get that out real quick. So this is another big boy. This is one of my favorite knives in my collection. This is the USA edition Midgards Messer Thunrar, and this knife is chonky. This knife is almost 12 ounces. It's actually a little bit heavier. And as you can see, if you like the Thunrar, you're going to like the Xxl Toucan. But when you look at these two knives, you could tell that this was made, on a production line. Midgards Messer, they used Concept to do the OEM work on this knife, and they did a fantastic job. But this is in a completely different league. It's in a league of its own, because you can't look at this knife and not think about all the hours that went into making sure that each edge was perfectly knocked down and symmetrical, that things like these swedges or chamfers in the blade were actually even, and that everything had a nice polish to it and fits well. The difficult part about spending, $1,600 on a knife is that someone had to do this by hand. You have to get the tolerances perfectly, or things like the blade centering won't line up. And as you can see here, the blade centering is perfect. To get everything to fit together and not have any rattles, to have smooth action, to get the compound grind even. The level of craftsmanship here is outstanding. And Darac Steel is really reasonable with their prices, actually. And I'm going to talk about that real quick, because I asked Dario, I said, man, how much does it cost to get into one of your knives? And he said, on the low end, to start with a basic design, for me, a basic knife, we're looking at $750, $800. For this level of craftsmanship, that's incredible. And that's more than fair, because you have to consider the amount of time that it takes not only to make this, but to actually perfect the craft to be able to make this. The hours spent grinding, doing things by hand. When a production shop can just come in and knock out some scales in a reasonable amount of time. One man took this knife and he made it a reality. That's incredible to me. So, do I think that it's worth it? Yeah, absolutely. This is a piece that tells a story. This is a piece that could be an heirloom. It's a piece that could live in your pocket. And you never know. The best knife to use is the one that you're carrying. And I will stand by that. But guys, if you're interested in checking out some of Dario's work, I'll make sure to link his Instagram down below. He also has a website that I'll link as well in the description and in the pinned comment. And I asked him, hey, where can people find you? He said, Facebook, Instagram, go to his website. I believe he's still accepting orders, but with work like this, I can't imagine that his books will stay open for long. Definitely check them out. If you're in the market for what I would consider a reasonably priced custom knife, you definitely want to hit them up. This is fantastic. Let me know what you think about the custom Xxl Toucan in the comments section down below. And guys, what's your favorite custom knife that you wish you could get your hands on? Let me know.